on Mondays and Fridays or whenever I get a chance to upload. And I read true crime books and ASMR. So if that is of any interest to you, please don't forget to like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We're just gonna go ahead and jump right into the video. Sit back, relax, grab a snack, some wine, some water, anything that warms your heart, and enjoy some crime time. Warning, this video may contain details of graphic content. This channel is for mature audiences only. Some viewers might find this disturbing. Among the popular beach towns along the Pacific coast between Los Angeles and San Diego lies Newport Beach. Located in the middle of the Orange County, Newport Beach was known for its 7 tiny man-made islands, housing expensive mansions, many with their own docks and yachts, as expensive as the homes. The area is protected by Balboa, Venezuela, a long stretch of land that encapsulates the islands and creates a natural harbor. Although she didn't live in one of the mansions, 23-year-old Denise Huber did live with her parents in an upscale neighborhood of Newport Beach. Her shoulder-length straight brown hair and striking blue eyes made her very popular with the boys. Denise first met Steve Horrocks when she worked at the old spaghetti factory on the Balboa, Venezuela in 1987. Steve was a bartender and she was a waitress. They weren't romantically involved at the time. 4 years later, in 1991, Denise and Steve started dating. Steve still worked at the old spaghetti factory, and Denise had graduated from the University of California at Irvine with a degree in social sciences. The job market was tight at the time, and she couldn't find a job in her field. She took another waitressing job at the Canary Seafood Restaurant and worked part-time as a cashier at the Broadway department store. On the afternoon of June 2nd, 1991, Steve won 2 free tickets to see the singer Morrissey. Later that evening, the concert was being held at the Forum, a venue in Inglewood, nearly an hour north in Los Angeles County. Fortunately, Steve had to work that night, so he suggested Denise and his friend Rob Calvert go together. Denise was also good friends with Rob, so the two agreed to go to the concert together. After the concert, Denise and Rob decided to stop for a drink at the El Paso Cantina in Long Beach. Once there, they called Steve and invited him to meet them, but he declined. He had just gotten off work and was trying to save money. While having late night drinks, Denise and Rob ran into an acquaintance of Denise's named Ross. Denise knew that Ross had a crush on her for years. Ross asked Denise if he could speak to her privately outside. When Denise returned, she explained to Rob that Ross had asked her out and she turned him down. Rob and Denise stayed at El Paso Cantina until they closed after 1 a.m., then drove toward home. Denise dropped Rob off at his home in Huntington Beach just after 12 a.m. and continued her drive. The drive from Huntington Beach to Denise's house in the East Bluff neighborhood of Newport Beach ran along Highway 1, the Pacific Coast closed highway. However, when her parents awoke the next morning, they realized that Denise never made it home that night. It wasn't unheard of for Denise to stay out all night. After all, she was 23 years old, but it was extremely out of character for her to not let her parents know. Panicked her parents, Denise and Ione Huber called Denise's friend Tammy Brown. Although Tammy had known that she had gone to the concert, she hadn't heard from her since. Tammy gathered several friends, and alongside Denise's parents, they both set out to look for her. They had searched the whole day, but there was no sign of Denise. Just before sundown that evening, Tammy located Denise's car parked in the southbound lane along Highway 73, the Corona Del Mar Highway. It was just a few miles from her parents' home. The gray 1988 Honda Accord had been abandoned. The right rear tire was flat, the windows were rolled down, and the doors were unlocked. The battery had been drained, and it was evident that the headlights and emergency flashers had been on all night. When police arrived on the scene, they found no sign of a struggle, no blood, and nothing to indicate there had been foul play. The stretch of highway was in a busy area with plenty of businesses nearby and several call boxes where she could have called for help, but didn't. Still, there was no sign of Denise. Her keys, purse, and wallet were not found at the scene, and there were no signs of tampering with the tire. The side wall had failed, and there were skid marks showing that it had indeed blown all out. Everything indicated that she had pulled over and walked off of the freeway to find help. But one thing was troubling. There were no fingerprints in her car, not even her own. It was obvious that it had been wiped clean. Despite the car being wiped down, police initially believed she had possibly run off with a boyfriend without notifying her parents. Dennis and Ione, however, knew that this wasn't the case and were hit with an unescapable sense of dread. Their daughter had been taken against her will. Although Robert, Calvert, Steve, Horrocks, and Ross, the young men that asked her out at the bar that night, were all initially suspects, they were all cooperative and had alibis. They were quickly eliminated. Police were left with very few clues. They did what they could. They used helicopters to search the immediate area and trained dogs to find her scent, but were ultimately left with nothing to go on. She had simply vanished. Denise's parents turned to the public for help. They raised $10,000 in donations to offer a reward for the return of their daughter. They placed a huge 30-foot banner on the side of an apartment building that faced the freeway where her car was found. If I can find a picture of the banner, I'll insert a clip. They were looking for any information at all from anyone that may have seen their daughter on the side of the road that night. Giant aerial missing girl was run on both local news and nationally. On Inside Edition and America's Most Wanted. At a loss for options, the family accepted the help of unsolicited sidekicks, but nothing helped. They even took the family dog to the scene where the car was. According to Denise, the dog went crazy and picked up her scent. He followed the dog through a hole in the fence along the highway into a hotel room at the nearby Marriott Courtyard Hotel. Police followed the lead, but this too was a dead end. The Hooper family hired a private investigator who clashed with the detectives. The private investigator believed that Denise had been abducted elsewhere and her car had been placed on the Corona Del Mar freeway as a distraction. After all, Denise was traveling from Huntington Beach to Newport Beach. She wouldn't have needed to go that far inland to get home. She normally would have taken the Pacific Coast Highway. 3 years went by. Oh my God. 3 years without knowing where your daughter is. I will have a heart attack. I literally will have a heart attack. 3 years went by with no additional clues. Police checked Denise's dental records against every unidentified body that was found. But by that point, the likelihood of Denise ever being found dead or alive was extremely slim. Eventually, Denise's parents gave up hope and moved to North Dakota. On the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance, Denise's mother told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "As time goes by, I realize Denise is probably not alive. Just to know and not have to wonder what happened would be easier than this mystery," end quote. Prescott, Arizona lies halfway between the Phoenix Valley and the mountains of Flagstaff. Its small town, Old Westville, was a welcome respite from the scorching July heat of Phoenix. Elaine and Jack Court were visiting the Prescott swap meet and looking to buy some paint for their paint supply business when they met 34-year-old John Famalaro. Famalaro was working as a self-employed house painter and had been selling paint at the swap meet. Famalaro told Jack and Elaine that he had much more paint to sell them and invited them to his house after the swap meet ended for the day. When Elaine and Jack arrived at his house, they were a bit surprised. John was clearly a hoarder. Though he lived in a nice house located in the Prescott Country Club, it was cluttered with junk. From floor to ceiling, the entire house was filled with random items, deteriorating cardboard boxes, and hundreds of paint cans. Elaine and Jack purchased the paint that they needed, and as they left the property, they noticed a 24-foot Ryder rental truck parked in the driveway. Weeds that had grown to waist height around the truck made it obvious that it had been there for quite some time. Not only was it out of place, parked in the driveway, but they noticed that there was a very long electrical extension cord leading from the house into the back of the truck. I can only imagine what's in that rental truck. Jack knew that trunk rental companies didn't usually sell trucks to the public without painting over the logo on the side and asked Elaine to jot down the license plate number before she and Jack left. Good thinking. Good thinking. The couple assumed the truck was stolen, and when they got back to Phoenix, notified a friend who was a Phoenix police detective. Jack and Elaine's assumptions were correct. When the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department searched for the license plate, the truck had indeed stolen. It was originally rented in California and never returned. The extension cord leading into the rear of the truck most likely meant that it was being used as a lab for methamphetamine. Prepared for a drug raid, sheriff's deputies paid a visit to John's house. When they opened the back of the Ryder truck, it looked similar to what Jack and Elaine had seen inside of the home. The entire truck was filled with paint cans and cardboard boxes. It wasn't the meth lab they were expecting, but detectives were curious to find what was at the end of the long extension cord. Pushing aside boxes and paint cans, the cord led to a large 15 cubic foot chest freezer at the very back of the truck. Are you guys thinking what I'm thinking? Police cut the thick masking tape that held the lid shut and opened it. Inside, they found something wrapped in large black plastic bags and a few smaller white plastic bags. All the bags seemed to be covering one large item. Initially, officers assumed John was just storing a deer carcass that he had killed, but when they felt part of the black bag, they realized that what they felt was a frozen human arm. As they peeled away parts of the plastic bag, they revealed the frozen body of a young woman. She was scrunched into the fetal position with her hands cuffed behind her back. Her body was wrapped in black plastic bags, and her head was wrapped in white plastic bags. Ew, I'm just picturing this in my head, and oh my god, I can only imagine like what detectives go through like when they discover stuff like this. Like I would vomit. Beneath the white plastic bags, duct tape covered her mouth and nose. The bottom of the freezer contained a frozen layer of bodily fluids. John F. was immediately taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. Assuming the body had been frozen for some time, detectives knew that thawing it would cause a rapid decomposition. In order to keep the body intact as long as possible for analysis, the entire freezer was brought to a forensics lab in Phoenix. The body in the bags was naked except for rings on her fingers. Using a hairdryer, forensic scientists slowly defrosted her fingers. First, in order to get fingerprints. Slowly and carefully, they were able to get a set of perfect fingerprints before the decomposition made them unreadable. The prints were a match for Denise Huber. Further analysis showed that her skull had been shattered from blunt force trauma. Armed with a search warrant, police searched John's home and the home of his mother, who lived next door to him. His mother, Ann F., owned both homes. John's mother was upset that the police were searching her homes and defiantly set up a lawn chair across the street from the homes. She spent the afternoon glaring at the police. She was probably in on it too. Inside John's house, detectives found 2 boxes marked "Quote Christmas," but filled with contents that were anything but festive. The boxes contained the clothing that Denise Huber was wearing the night she went missing. Her high heels, driver's license, credit cards, lipstick, car keys, checkbook, a makeup compact, purse, a set of handcuff keys, and a pair of John's jeans. Also inside one of the boxes was a Montgomery Ward department store receipt for the chest freezer. It showed that he had purchased the freezer in California just days after Denise went missing. Both her clothes and his were covered with blood. DNA later taken from Denise's bone marrow detectives a bloody hammer, a roofer's nail puller, and assorted guns and handcuffs. Forensic anthropologists reconstructed her shattered skull, showing that Denise had been beaten on the head with a nail puller 31 times. From pieces of white plastic embedded in the skull, they were able to determine that the plastic bags were over her head while she was being beaten. Detectives were troubled when they found more boxes containing women's clothes that did not belong to Denise. They believed that this may not have been the first time, and John had possibly done this before. Police brought in cadaver dogs that found a scent which led straight to the basement. After days of excavating, however, the police found nothing. One of the boxes marked Christmas had an address on it for a rented warehouse space in Laguna Hills, California, just 20 miles from Newport Beach. Detectives found that John had lived in Newport Beach at the same time Denise went missing. It was renting the warehouse space for his painting business. When detectives entered John's former warehouse, they noticed a dark stain in the corner on the concrete floor and walls. Detectives sprayed luminol on the floor and walls of the warehouse, a chemical agent that fluoresces when it comes into contact with the iron compound in blood. The result was positive for massive amounts of blood that matched Denise's DNA. Prosecutors believe John posed as a sheriff's deputy, abducting Denise when her car broke down on the Corona Del Mar freeway and took her to his nearby Laguna Hills, where he forcefully touched her and bludgeoned her. At trial, there was little doubt of John's guilt. The forensic evidence against him was undeniable. Forensic scientists testified that they found 7 specimens of his sperm in Denise's body. He knew he was going down. Facing the death penalty, John's best chance was to play the sympathy card. Maybe he could get life in prison rather than the death penalty. John, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? John's brother, Warren, was a reluctant witness at the trial and testified that their mother had indeed pushed their 90-year-old grandmother down a flight of steps. However, he flatly denied essaying his brother John. Warren told the jury that John was a frail, sickly little boy with a nervous twitch and was bullied as a child. He went on to explain that their mother, Anne, bathed them until they were 10 years old and paid specific attention to scrubbing their genitals. Yuck. I'm moving on. He continued by saying that John would have extraordinary mood swings. Quote, just powerhouse beyond type A, very type N manic, end quote, whatever that means, and would swing to, quote, just barely able to breathe or keep his eyes open, end quote. He also said that when John's pregnant girlfriend left him and gave up their child for adoption, quote, it crushed and devastated him. Oh my God. The main factor for why his girlfriend left him was John's mother, who had threatened to kill her. Ultimately, John was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sodomy. In September 1977, a jury of 9 women and 3 men recommended that Famalaro, John, be sentenced to death. Executions in California were halted in 2019. Dang, he's still alive. And the last person executed was in 2006. As of the time of this writing, John Famalaro currently sits on death row in the San Joaquin State Prison, though capital punishment has not